All right, so first question. What is oogenesis? It is the formation of the gametes. What is the hilum of the ovary? It's the entrance and exit of the blood vessels. So hilum, that's like what it always means, right? You saw the hilum of the kidneys. That's the hilum of the ovaries. Where does fertilization happen? Uterus, ovary, fallopian tube, or wedding night? If you put D, it is C. That's true. So it's fallopian tube is where it should happen. Ectopic means it implants in the fallopian tubes. So it's supposed to get fertilized in the fallopian tube, start developing, and then implant in the uterus and lay down. And how does estrogen affect the uterus? High levels cause menstruation, high levels cause ovulation, or high levels tell the cells in the endometrium to undergo mitosis. It is C. Just C. So ovulation, first of all, where does that happen? That happens in the ovaries. It does not happen in the uterus. Did you get this one right, Ross? Yeah.
You said thickening, mitosis, more cells, thickening.
I'm just teasing you. High levels cause menstruation. It's actually low levels. It's when estrogen's not there, the menstruation happens. So disappointed. That's all right. That last stuff. Oh, and a zygote, sorry. So a zygote is a fertilized egg, something like that. Some kind of fertilized egg, developing embryo. All right, I have something fun for us to watch first. I should have shown this with the male system. All right. I wonder if anyone's seen this movie. Everything You Wanted to Know About Sex by Woody Allen. It's hilarious. All right, here we go.
Well, this looks like it.
You guys know what it's like out there?
It's like they told us in training school. It's an ovum.
I'm scared. I don't want to go.
This is what all this training was for.
Yeah, but who knows what it's going to be like out there?
You saw slides in class.
Yeah, but you hear these strange stories, like there's this pill these women take, or sometimes the guys will slam their heads up against a wall of hard rubber.
Oh, that's nonsense.
What if it's a homosexual encounter?
Look, this is no time to doubt our mission. You took an oath when you entered sperm training school to fertilize an ovum or die trying.
No, I'm scared. I don't want to go out there.
There's actually like a 10-minute scene, and it's just like all the parts of reproduction happening, but controlled by people. So there's like a control room, like it's a spaceship communicating with like the penis and like telling the tongue and the eyes. It's just really funny. But we don't have 10 minutes to watch that, unfortunately. So anyway, sperm look like little men in little hats. Just waiting. Yeah, bunch of Woody Allens. All right. So anyways, in order for any reproduction to happen, we better make some eggs. And one interesting thing, I think, is the fact that those eggs actually start developing before you're born, even the first few stages. And that's making stem cells turning into primary oocytes, and they make primordial follicles. So when you're born, for a woman, you've got wait, did I put that question on there? Yeah, you've got a whole lot of those follicles. We'll talk about the number in a little bit. They're primordial, they're very small. So right there. So all over the ovaries, very small, and they just kind of stay that way until puberty. Nothing really happens to them. They're just kind of hanging out. And all these other stages that we're going to talk about will be like after puberty it'll happen. All right, if you had to guess, how many primary follicles are present when you start puberty, do you think? All right, so we're tied between C and D. The answer is C. So there's 40,000 follicles. Obviously, you're not going to make 40,000 eggs, right? What's that? So you've got, like 15 to, I don't know, what do you think menopause is? Like 55 on average or something? Yeah. Something like that. So you got like 40 years times 12. What's 40 times 12? 480 on average, so something like 480 eggs, but you've got 40,000 follicles. So I think some people have this misconception that you've only got so many eggs, you run out and you're menopause or something. I don't know, I think I thought that for a while, but it's not really how it works. You've got plenty of extra eggs, it's just, for whatever reason, I don't think they really know the signals exactly, just something with aging, that everything kind of shuts off, but you would still technically have eggs in there.
Your thyroid has something to do with it.
Does that?
Yeah.
That makes sense. And of course, that's why you can do like fertility treatments and ovulate like 20 eggs at a time and then collect them or donate them. And it's not like you'd run out or something. To buy one or to donate one? And I think they pay people pretty well for doing it because it's pretty, but it's pretty horrible, right?
Yeah, the drugs they put you on.
Yeah.
To donate an egg?
Yeah. I mean, you have, because you're basically taking a whole bunch of hormones
Yeah, you're taking fertility treatments, and then they extract it.
for like a couple months, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're awful.
So when you say not worth the $10,000?
No.
Yeah, there's a reason they pay people $10,000 to do it. And they pay men like $10 for their sperm or something. There's the difference.
And it's like,
All right, so
you looked at it.
what do the follicles look like? What are they made of? So primordial follicle is pretty small. There's the little halfway developed oocyte inside. And then it's surrounded by follicular cells, which secrete this fluid. And then outside of them are the stromal cells and collagen. So they're a kind of fibroblast, or like it's like connective tissue, basically around it. And we won't go through all the stages, but mostly follicle stimulating hormone, which we'll talk about more later. It's produced. Where is it made? Same in the males. Remember where FSH was made? It's made in the pituitary. It's produced, it goes down to the ovary, and it tells those primary follicles to start developing, to make like a secondary oocyte that can be ovulated in a little while. So you're starting at primordial, follicle stimulating hormone comes down and tells it to start developing, and it's eventually going to become this mature follicle. And you'll be able to see this under the microscope. It's pretty big. And what it looks like, oops. One of the first things you see is kind of this empty space where there's no cells, and that's full of that follicular fluid. And you also see a bunch of granulosa cells developing, a lot more blood flow to the area, because obviously you need nutrients for all these cells to grow and for the oocyte to develop. And it is kind of surrounded by that basement membrane. So it gets bigger, more blood flow, and you get that sort of empty space filled with fluid. And in terms of, remember we talked about meiosis a little bit? that primordial follicle, so this stuff in yellow, that happens before you're born. And then this little orange stage, not a lot changes. And then going from primary to mature, it goes through meiosis once. And then one of the cells keeps all the cytoplasm, one just disintegrates. And then one of the stranger things is it actually doesn't finish meiosis until after the sperm fertilizes it. I don't know why that is. I'm trying to look it up. I still don't know. Doesn't seem like anyone really knows. So the sperm comes in, and before anything else happens, then it divides to make the final ovum after the sperm's inside, which is kind of strange, but that'll happen later. So the ovulated oocyte is the secondary oocyte. We'll see that in a little movie. So basically just the oocyte comes out. It's called like a ruptured follicle, and it'll be tossed. Where does it go? What structure does it go to? Yeah, it'll go into the fallopian tube next. We'll see that little video later. That's kind of the development. What would you say a follicle is? Or what is it made of, I guess is a better way to say it. All right, so chat with your group. I'll tell you it's not D. So try again. Discuss. All right, the answer is E. It is all of them. So let's take a look back here. So there's the oocyte. The follicular cells, those are epithelial cells because they secrete fluid, watertight barrier. And then outside of that is the connective tissue, which are stromal cells and collagen fibers. That's extracellular matrix. It's funny because almost everybody put D the first time. And I was like, oh, they'll just put E for the next one because they decide two were right. So, all right. Something very important happens to the empty follicle. It doesn't just totally just go away. It still has an important function to do. And it turns into the corpus luteum. And that's a structure that makes a whole lot of hormones. So it makes high levels of estrogen, progesterone, relaxin, and inhibin as well. And if the embryo does implant, it actually produces a hormone, we'll talk about in a little bit, that tells the corpus luteum to keep making estrogen and progesterone. Because otherwise, your estrogen drops, menstruation, no baby. So you've got to tell the ovary, hey, something's in there. Keep making these hormones so we keep that uterine wall thick and full of blood and everything to support it. But if nothing happens, if it's not fertilized or if it doesn't implant for some reason, it just breaks down and you stop making all those hormones. You mean like your at-home tests or blood tests? There is the one hormone that's produced, the human chorionic gonadotropin, that's made by the implanted embryo. And it's not really made at any other time, so it should be pretty accurate.
There's like a lot of different tests that
Oh, I see what you're talking about. You're not talking about finding out if you're pregnant.
no.
Like what tests? Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of changes that happen through the whole body, so you'd be getting like false positives, false negatives, right? Because if you say, oh, this level, like blood pressure or something, blood pressure goes up and you're pregnant. I'm sure your thyroid hormone changes, or... Really? Huh. Yeah, that makes sense. Glad hopefully the people doing the test know that, and they're not like, hey, you're pregnant, also you've got all these diseases. Yeah. Then they call you back, oh, sorry, that person didn't know. You're actually fine.
You thought you were
In preparation for today, I watched a movie called No Men Beyond This Point last night. Have you ever heard of that? So it's a PG movie. It's about somehow weird mutation happens and women don't need sperm anymore to get pregnant. It's just like the eggs develop all the way on their own. And then there's no Y chromosomes. Everyone's who's born is a woman. And men become like this subspecies, and they just like get put on reservations and stuff and become extinct, basically. It's pretty funny. They basically put all the men in like old folks' homes, give them entertainment. Y'all should watch it. It's pretty funny. All right, I'm gonna go and pass this out for you to fill in. I didn't staple like I was supposed to, so make sure you get a table and these questions. Just gonna pass it around. It's not actually blank pages. All right, so go ahead and glance at the stage of cycle, and we'll do the ovary events. All right, so I kind of did the first one for you. So during menstruation, the ovary's getting ready for like the next round. So the primordial follicles kind of start developing a little bit. Look for stage of cycle. All right, see what we can find.
The ovarian cycle is the monthly sequence of events that takes place in the ovaries. The three phases of the ovarian cycle are the pre-ovulatory phase, the ovulatory phase, and the post-ovulatory phase.
Just looking for a few words for each of these stages.
Prior to ovulation, primary follicles develop into secondary follicles. The number of follicular cells surrounding the primary oocyte increases. Estrogen secretions increase as well. During the pre-ovulatory phase, one of the secondary follicles develops into a single dominant, mature, or Graafian follicle. The mature follicle continues to secrete estrogen, and estrogen blood levels peak. Luteinizing and follicle-stimulating hormones reach their peak. The primary oocyte has progressed through meiosis I and has begun meiosis II, stopping at metaphase II. It is now known as a secondary oocyte.
So I'd say there's just 2, maybe 3 important things for that one. So probably, secondary follicle develops into mature follicle. Oocyte goes through meiosis. And you could see what's happening to these hormones over here. So estrogen's going up. LH and FSH are also rising as well. And progesterone. So all the hormones are going up. I guess that's an easier way to say it. So LH, FSH, estrogen, progesterone are all going up. So next up is ovulatory phase.
The luteinizing hormone surge signals the mature follicle to rupture and release the secondary oocyte into the pelvic cavity. Secretion of estrogen decreases, thereby inhibiting the release of luteinizing hormone, stopping the ovulation of another secondary oocyte.
So that one's pretty short, right? What causes ovulation? What's the signal? Like just a little bit of it, or? Yeah, so a whole lot of LH causes the follicle to rupture and release the oocyte into the fallopian tube. And one of the things that happens right after that, you could see in green there, is estrogen production for the follicle, because it's all broken down kind of. It drops pretty rapidly. You can see like in this pink, you've got your green line dropping during the ovulatory phase. And LH and progesterone. So after ovulation, all the hormones drop their levels. All right. No, you're fine. It's loud out there. Right. And what happens in post-ovulatory phase?
After ovulation and the release of the secondary oocyte, the ruptured follicle collapses and becomes a corpus luteum. Stimulated by luteinizing hormones, the corpus luteum secretes progesterone and estrogen. This prepares the endometrium of the uterus for implantation. If the secondary oocyte is fertilized, the resulting embryo will implant into the prepared endometrium. If the secondary oocyte is not fertilized, it degenerates.
All right, so what would you say for that one? Yeah, the corpus luteum. And what does that thing do? Yeah, it actually makes it. So it secretes estrogen and progesterone. And then maybe you want to include, if an embryo implants, it keeps making the hormones. If it doesn't implant, it stops making the hormones. This chapter is a little confusing because it's like all of it acting together, but you can only talk about one thing at a time. So don't worry, it'll all come together eventually. We'll get ovaries, uterus, hormones, all sort of one after the other. So you got your chart, questions? You kind of got the idea? All right, so if there's one chapter to talk about hormones, it's definitely this one, because that's the basis for the whole cycle. Controls everything, kind of makes sense once you sort of get it. So the first one is kind of in charge of starting everything. That's GnRH. You saw that in the male system. It has the exact same function. What did it do in the males? GnRH. Well, first, where's it made? Okay, and where does it go? Okay, and what does it tell the pituitary to do? Right. So same function, women and men. Made in the hypothalamus, goes to the pituitary, tells it to make LH and FSH. Same thing. And just like in men, when do you start making GnRH? It happens at puberty. That's kind of the signal. Do you know one of the main signals for starting puberty, especially in women? It's actually body fat percentage. So if you've heard, like ultra runners or people who are anorexic, they stop having periods, right? Or never develop at the beginning. You don't have enough body fat. Why would that make sense? Why would the body not want to do all this if you didn't have any body fat? Yeah, you're not even able to support a baby if you don't have any body fat at all. I can't remember the number. I'm trying to remember. So it's something like 15% to start puberty, 20% to actually successfully implant an embryo or something.
Girls are starting their period earlier and they're blaming it on our estrogen and stuff in the foods. Is it truly because maybe we're just more obese?
I tend to think that's a big part of it. I think so.
So you think the two play a part?
I think so.
Mostly is we're more obese as children.
Well, the endocrine disruptors could play a role too. And maybe they're causing the obesity even. Because, obesity is under control of hormones too. So, could be. But you can imagine it's pretty hard to study. Like, how do you prove that some chemical, or it's not even one chemical, right? What if it's like 10 acting together? How do you even prove that? Or disprove it? It's nearly impossible.
The bee docs that I worked for, she
Yeah.
actually delivered a child from a 10-year-old girl.
Really?
Yeah.
That's pretty messed up.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's like even in things like body food, people curious,
they did back in the day?
I had a friend.
Not at 10 though,
They
usually.
were like 12, 14.
Well, I had a friend that got pregnant at 12, gave birth at 13, and she bled out so bad she didn't get her period again until she was 17.
Oh, wow.
She'd never be able to have another kid.
Uh-huh.
She got pregnant with her second kid, and she bled out again, and then so if she were to have any more kids, she'd die. And it was caused because they're giving birth to her first one.
Hmm.
It caused so much damage to the inside of her body that her body can't take it.
Oh, geez. That's so sad.
Yeah. That's, yeah, I agree.
You're just thinking about my parents, like, oh man, now I have to raise a baby.
You know what else is sad? That diagram.
That's the horrible
Oh, yeah. And I was looking at it in the book like, oh, crap.
All right. I actually like it because it shows you everything at once.
Yeah.
So, first of all these arrows, like the blue and orange arrows, mean like activate, and all the red dotted things mean stop, inhibit, something like that. So you may want to add that to if you have the PowerPoint or something, just to remind yourself. All right, so we'll start up here. FSH, we talked about it already. It tells the follicles to develop. LH activates ovulation, and it also tells the corpus luteum to make estrogen and progesterone. It also tells the follicle to make estrogen and progesterone, kind of in that pre-ovulatory phase when they're rising. So LH, just like in men, what did LH do in men? Increases testosterone production. Same idea in women, it's increasing production of those other hormones at the ovary. And then, what do those hormones do? So the estrogen produced, that's the female characteristics. And then also it tells the uterus to develop, mitosis, thicken, more blood vessels. Progesterone, very similar, gets the uterus ready. Talk more about that in a little bit. And progesterone and estrogen, they have negative feedback with the hypothalamus and the pituitary, with one exception. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But high levels of estrogen have a positive feedback with LH. So just to be confusing, low levels of estrogen tell the pituitary to make more LH. Medium levels of estrogen tell it to make less. High levels of estrogen tell it to make more. More, less, more. It's one of the only hormones that work like that I can think of.
So then does a person have high estrogen levels if they have low LH levels?
Say it one more time. What were the last thing you said?
If they have women who have, if they have high estrogen levels in their body, if they have low levels of LH?
No. They would have, if they have low estrogen, well, it depends if you're talking about like chronic or the response to fix it. Because if you have low estrogen, the body would make more LH to try to fix it.
So, like endometriosis, is that like affected by the hormones? Because doesn't it make it like,
It's like overgrowth, right?
and that doesn't shed?
And doesn't shed.
You have a problem with shedding.
And you end up with
Ours,
Six.
yeah.
Yeah, but then how would you?
Because my aunt had really bad endometriosis,
Uh-huh.
and now she's like trying to get pregnant, she doesn't get pregnant, but
Because the uterine lining doesn't work right.
IVF, more pregnant, you know, they use IVF.
Yeah, and I'm sure they did some treatments to help the uterus get ready too.
Yeah, it's called a septum, and they go in there and do like a DNC.
Right.
Yeah.
So they like force the lining off, kind of scrape it.
Yeah,
There's so much, yeah, they
it's
scrape it.
called septum.
Wait, I
Uh-huh.
got it, it's
I'm
like a
getting ready
pumpkin.
to do it. It's called septum.
They just come like,
They scrape
Yeah.
it, and then
Crazy.
like my sister, they scraped her and said if you do it, you might never get pregnant, and she happened to get pregnant, and then it caused her to get hysterectomy at 25
oh, crazy.
because her it was so bad. Yeah, they said that, and she had 3 just fine. So. Yeah, but
Yeah, it's called septum. It's a thin line.
Yeah, I don't know. All these doctors always telling people can't have kids, and then it's like, seems like half the time they're wrong. It's like, why are you telling people that?
Trying to lower the population.
I guess.
When it has medium estrogen, it tells it to stop. When it has high estrogen, it says to produce more estrogen.
You know, so it's like, it's not like
Oh, I even have a slide of it. Sorry.
it is.
So, so low levels of estrogen. That's going to tell you to make more LH, FSH. Moderate levels inhibit, but super high levels, when there's no progesterone, increases LH and FSH. And that's because what makes estrogen? For you, Mac, do you hear?
Your, would that be like if you have babies?
It does, but before ovulation, what makes it? The follicle. And as the follicle gets bigger and more mature, it makes more estrogen. And the idea is for the ovary to know when to release it. The follicle makes more and more estrogen, which makes more and more LH. And once you're making so much estrogen and you get to that peak, you have a huge amount of LH, which tells it to release. That's why it has that loop, so that you release a follicle that's developed all the way. You know when to do it. Does that sort of make sense?
So when you have low levels of SH and LH, then you may not get any development of good on a separate note.
Right. So if you had really low levels of those two, you probably wouldn't be having a period at all, or the cycle wouldn't be happening.
Or you would, it'd just be like
That'd be possible, yeah. Because if you have low levels of this, that means you're going to make low estrogen, low progesterone, and that lining isn't really going to develop completely. All right. So there's a slide about it. We just talked about it, I think, for enough time. But there it is in a slide, a figure. You may want to circle this or put a star next to it, so you can sort of line up all these phases with this hormone chart and understand all of it together, thinking about what the different hormones do, what's making them, why they're going up and down. We'll go back to it after we get to go through the uterus. One interesting thing you could tell, the estrogen is going up right before ovulation, and then just, a few hours after that, you have that surge of LH. That's that positive feedback. And then as soon as the follicle releases it, it ruptures, it's not making estrogen anymore, so the LH drops as well. And this is the corpus luteum here at the end, getting the uterus ready. Because it takes a few days for that oocyte to get to the uterus. So you want to make sure the uterus is ready to implant an embryo if it's fertilized on the way there. All right, what hormone do you think is measured with this thing, an ovulation tester or predictor, I guess? All right, maybe chat with your group there. Oh, well, that's quite a spread there. So what would make the most sense? All right. Interesting. Progesterone. The answer is C. Luteinizing hormone. So, when do you think when would you be fertile?
During that peak when the ruptures.
So, when do you want the sperm to come in there? When the follicle's going down the fallopian tube, right? Which is right after that LH surge. Well, it depends. Depends if you want a kid or not. So, you measure that, and then you know the next few days would be the most fertile time.
Yeah. 48 hours.
And the reason they have those is because 28 days, that's an average. It's a very broad spectrum of like how long it's going to be. You can't just say, oh, it's been 14 days, I must be ovulating or something. Not really true.
I didn't read the picture that it says ovulation.
Oh, you thought it was a pregnancy test?
Yes, I didn't even read it. Stupid. That was so my fault.
I mean, it's got a lot on there. So first response ovulation, fertile days.
Super obvious, but I just didn't even look at that. I just thought it was a baby.
You can get a free app with it.
Look at that.
Because I was like, a pregnancy test, don't they test the H? Yeah, it really does.
Yeah.
Right? What is that? HCG? HCG. Thank you. I was like, not HGH, but yeah. Like, what is that?
All right, so let's take a look at the uterine cycle then. Actually, I can just talk about it. No, I like this picture. All right. All right, so let's see what happens during the uterine cycle. Obviously, this is overlapping with the ovarian cycle.
The uterus goes through a cyclical developmental pattern to be ready for implantation and support of an embryo. The uterine or menstrual cycle is under the control of ovarian hormones. The uterine cycle also has 3 phases: the menstrual phase, the proliferative phase, and the secretory phase.
Right. So let's see these phases.
By convention, the beginning of the menstrual cycle is considered to be the first day of the menstrual flow. Changes in the endometrium are triggered by changes in levels of ovarian hormones. Falling levels of progesterone cause the spiral arterioles within the uterine endometrial lining to constrict. As a result, the cells of the stratum functionalis die and slough off.
All right, so what's the signal for this to happen? Yeah, so low progesterone. That causes reduced blood flow, which makes the cells die and slough off. That's what they're talking about, vasoconstriction of the arterioles. That just means lower blood flow to those cells. And it's pretty dramatically different. I know because I did all these mouse surgeries where I did hysterectomies on them. And depending on where in the cycle they are, it's like 3 times bigger from the end of the menstrual phase to the end of like the proliferative phase. Like you could just see it inside the animal. It's like tiny, it's like super huge. All right, so what about proliferative?
After menses, the proliferative phase of the uterine cycle begins. In response to estrogens secreted by the maturing ovarian follicles, the cells of the stratum bassalis proliferate, regenerating the stratum functionalis and repairing the endometrium.